I never thought I'd return to the ocean. Not after what happened in 2098, when the coastal cities sank and the world turned its back on the seas. But then, an encrypted letter arrived, addressed to me. No name, no signature, just a line that read, "Atlantis breathes again. Come if you still believe." I was 63, retired from marine archaeology, and living quietly in a modest home outside Charleston, South Carolina. My joints ached with the damp salt air, and most of my colleagues had moved on, either to orbital labs or to Mars. But something about that letter stirred me. Maybe it was the handwriting. Maybe it was the word believe. The ocean had changed since the collapse. After the Great Flood of 2091 and the melting of the last Arctic wall, most of Earth's surface had been restructured. Coastal nations were gone. Oceans were patrolled by solar-powered AI drones. Humans were discouraged from deep-sea exploration. Too risky, too expensive, and frankly, too painful. We had turned to the stars instead. The sea was our forgotten frontier. But I couldn't forget. I'd spent decades searching for mythical ruins, ancient tectonic fault lines, and rumored underwater sanctuaries. I'd always believed that if Atlantis had ever existed, it wouldn't have been destroyed, it would have adapted. And now someone was telling me it had. I stood at the edge of the Atlantic that evening, letting the waves kiss my boots, the wind heavy with salt and memory. The sun was bleeding into the sea like a golden wound. I closed my eyes and felt something old awaken in me. I was going back into the deep, back into wonder. The journey began at Dock 17, one of the last remaining human-operated ports on the eastern seaboard. It was a modest place, tucked between rusting solar towers and algae farms, where oceanographers and scavengers still came and went in creaky vessels with names like the Salty Memory or Hopeful Leviathan. But I wasn't boarding one of those. Instead, waiting for me was a slender, obsidian-black submersible unlike anything I had ever seen, sleek, silent, and humming with energy. Its exterior was marked only by a small emblem, a spiral shell encircled by 8 stars. I had never seen that symbol before, and yet it felt ancient, familiar. As I approached, the craft's door slid open without a sound. No pilot, no instructions, just a soft blue glow beckoning me inside. The cabin was minimalistic but comforting, lit by bioluminescent panels and scented faintly of cedar. A voice, genderless and calm, welcomed me. "Welcome, Celine. Estimated descent, 3 hours. Destination, undisclosed coordinates. Water pressure adaptive hull engaged." It knew my name. I strapped in, heart racing, not with fear, but with anticipation. The kind I hadn't felt in years. The kind you only get when you're about to touch the unknown. As the craft submerged, the light from the surface faded quickly. We passed through layers of history, sunken oil rigs, drowned skyscrapers, schools of metallic fish engineered to clean microplastics. The ocean had become a graveyard and a garden all at once. Past 1,000 meters, the world turned pitch black, except for the strange soft pulses from the vehicle's sensors. And then, I felt it. A pressure, not from the water, but from within. A presence, as if something down there was aware of me. Waiting. I pressed my hand against the curved window, peering into the darkness. I whispered the word that had haunted me since the letter arrived. Atlantis. The descent slowed, and the humming quieted to a low, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat in the ocean. I leaned closer to the window, expecting only darkness. But then, in the far distance, a glow appeared. At first, it shimmered like moonlight trapped in water. Then it grew stronger, outlining towers, domes, and walkways beneath the sea. Impossibly elegant structures, swaying slightly with the current as though they were breathing. The submersible stopped. I held my breath. We hovered before a massive dome made of some kind of transparent, iridescent material. Its surface shimmered with patterns that reminded me of stained glass, except they were alive, moving, responding to unseen signals. A soft chime echoed in the cabin. The voice returned. External pressure stabilized. Proceed. The door slid open. I stepped out, expecting to feel water rush in, but there was none. A corridor greeted me, enclosed in a bubble of breathable air, lit by bioluminescent threads running through the walls. My boots made no sound on the floor, which felt soft, organic, almost like walking on a reef. As I walked deeper, The architecture unfolded around me like a blooming coral. The city was not built, it had grown. No signs of humans. No traditional machines. And yet, there was order. Harmony. Everywhere I looked, form followed function in ways that felt intuitive, almost poetic. Gardens floated vertically. Schools of light followed my movement. And in the distance, beneath a glass bridge, I saw people. Or at least, they looked like people. Tall, slender forms glided effortlessly through the water outside the dome. They wore no suits. Their skin shimmered slightly, like scales. But they moved with purpose, their gestures calm, their expressions serene. I suddenly felt out of place. Not unwelcome, but unmistakably foreign. Who are they? I whispered aloud. And then, from a voice I didn't expect, one from behind me. They are what we were meant to become. The first thing I noticed as I stepped deeper into the dome was the silence. Not the silence of absence, but of intention, like a cathedral carved into the sea. Every surface curved smoothly, reflecting soft teal and violet hues from the bioluminescent threads that pulsed gently in the walls. There were no overhead lights, no buzzing generators, only the steady rhythm of the ocean's breath. The corridor opened into a vast chamber. Above me, the dome's ceiling arched like a night sky turned upside down, filled not with stars, but with slow-moving jellyfish that glowed like lanterns. Their tendrils pulsed gently, casting shadows that danced on the walls like old memories. And then I saw them again. The aquatic beings. They watched me from behind the transparent dome, gliding weightlessly in the water just outside the structure. They didn't approach. They didn't flee. They simply observed, as if measuring me, not in fear, but in curiosity. They had human-like features, but longer limbs, smoother skin, and a quiet grace in their movements. Their eyes were large and iridescent, shifting in color like the sea itself. One of them tilted their head, mirroring my motion. For a strange, beautiful second, I felt we shared something, an understanding beyond words. There were no guards, no weapons, only openness. I should have been frightened. Instead, I felt a sense of reverence, as if I had stepped into someone else's sacred dream. A society that had evolved differently, not around dominance or control, but something older, something harmonious. A soft tone sounded from the wall beside me, followed by a ripple in the air. A doorway formed, seamlessly, silently. They've invited you, the voice inside my earpiece said. Go slowly. They value intention here. I swallowed. Whatever lay ahead wasn't just a city. It was a mirror, held up to the future we might have forgotten how to become. As I stepped through the shimmering doorway, a sense of weightlessness washed over me. Not physical, but emotional, like shedding the gravity of all the noise I'd known on the surface. The city unfolded in concentric circles, each layer pulsing gently with life. Pathways curled like seashell spirals, winding between coral-like structures that swayed ever so slightly, as if breathing. There were no buildings in the way we understood them. No glass. No concrete. Everything seemed grown, not built. The inhabitants moved without rush. They didn't speak, not out loud, at least. Their communication flowed through color and movement. A flicker of turquoise as one passed another. A ripple of amber that lingered like laughter. When they greeted me, their bodies shimmered in patterns that made my pulse slow, like a lullaby spoken through light. I quickly realized I was the loudest thing in the city. Every breath I took, every footstep I made, felt like thunder. They noticed, but never judged. It was as if they understood I came from a world that had forgotten how to be quiet. I followed an elder-looking figure who floated just ahead of me. Their presence exuded wisdom, not from age, but from stillness. They led me to a round chamber, open to the sea on one side, a wall of flowing water that bent but never broke. Beyond it, the ocean moved like a living mural, dotted with slow, glowing creatures whose names I'd never know. In the center of the room, a structure rose like a giant conch shell. The elder gestured toward it with a graceful tilt of the hand. Memory, said my guide through the earpiece, translating a pulse of meaning. This is where they keep their collective history. Not in books, not in data, in song and color, in shared dreaming. I felt like a child at the edge of something vast and sacred. This was not a city of control or efficiency. It was a civilization built on connection, each being a note in a symphony older than language. I touched the edge of the conch-like archive. It was warm, And for a moment, I forgot what I had come to ask. I just listened. I didn't expect them to ask me to stay. Not in words, of course. There was no proclamation, no grand announcement. It came as a slow bloom of violet light that circled the chamber, dancing along the curved walls. A kind of ceremonial hush followed. The elder touched their palm to their chest, then extended it outward, an unmistakable gesture, even in silence. I was being invited into something. The translator in my ear struggled to interpret it clearly. Offer, presence, belonging, it stammered. But I didn't need the device. I understood. They were offering more than hospitality. They were offering inclusion. A part of me was drawn to it. This world without war, without noise, without ambition clawing at your throat. No one trying to be louder, faster, richer. Just presence. Just being. But another part of me resisted, something very human and restless. I'd spent my entire life believing that words made us real. That stories gave us meaning. That to be silent was to disappear. Could I become part of a society that didn't speak the way I spoke, dream the way I dreamed? The elder must have sensed it. Their hand lowered gently, and the lights dimmed to a pale blue, a signal of understanding, not disappointment. You do not have to answer now, the translator relayed. But it didn't feel like a question with a deadline. It felt like a seed, planted in the soil of my doubt. As I left the chamber, I glanced back at the glowing archive, still humming softly behind me. I wondered what memories it held. I wondered what kind of world might be possible when history was carried not in wounds and warnings, but in beauty and breath. And for the first time since arriving, I didn't feel like a visitor. I felt, watched over. Not by a god. Not by a government. By something older. Quieter. Waiting. At first, I thought the light was just light. It was everywhere, radiating from the walls, the floors, the ceilings of their dome-like dwellings. It pulsed gently, like a slow heartbeat. Calming. Comforting. Alive. But the longer I stayed, the more I realized something strange. The light didn't just illuminate the city, it reacted to it. When a child laughed, it brightened. When two elders embraced, it turned a deep gold. And when I was alone, standing still, thinking too much, it dimmed, like it could feel my doubt. I started to notice patterns in it. Responses. Shifts. Not random. Not decorative. The light was listening. One evening, while walking through a quiet corridor that curved like the inside of a shell, I noticed a fissure in the wall. It was subtle, almost like a scar in the coral. But through it, I saw something different, a shaft of pure, white energy, humming quietly. It didn't pulse with emotion like the rest of the light. It just existed. Cold. Still. Watching. That night, I asked the elder what powered the city. Their eyes flickered with a shade I hadn't seen before, gray, like smoke underwater. Our light, the translator said, comes from memory. I waited for an explanation, but none came. Just silence, thick and expectant. Memory? I couldn't sleep that night. I kept turning the words over, like pebbles in my hand. What kind of memory? Whose? The next day, I returned to the fissure with my scanner. What I found changed everything. There was a chamber behind the wall, filled with floating neural strands, organic, pulsing, human. They weren't just preserving knowledge. They were preserving minds. The chamber wasn't large, but it felt infinite. I stood frozen, breath catching as I watched hundreds, maybe thousands, of translucent filaments suspended in water, each one glowing faintly with a unique rhythm. Some pulsed slow and steady, like a heartbeat at rest. Others danced erratically, as if caught in some inner storm. They weren't just biological constructs. They were conscious. One of the archivists, a tall, graceful figure cloaked in robes of refracted light, entered quietly, as if she had been waiting for me to find this place. You found them, she said, not with surprise, but with quiet acceptance. I asked what they were. She stepped closer to the strands and placed a gentle hand near one. This one, she said, was a poet. He lived before the floods, in your world. He wanted his memories to outlive the collapse. So we offered him a place here, in the archive. I stared at the filaments, stunned. These are people? I asked. Real people. They were, she said softly. Now they are echoes. She guided me deeper into the chamber. The air, if I could call it that, seemed to hum with thoughts unspoken. I didn't just see the memories. I could feel them. A woman humming to her newborn. A man planting a tree on a dying hill. A child laughing as rain kissed her cheeks for the first time. It was beautiful. And horrifying. I whispered, do they know they're still here? She hesitated. Some do. Some choose to sleep. Some still dream. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. These weren't archives of knowledge. They were prisons of consciousness. I sat with one of the archivists in a chamber shaped like a conch shell, its walls lined with softly humming memory filaments. Her name was Lasara, and unlike the others, she showed signs of age, silver strands of hair, faint creases near her mouth. She looked human. "You're not like them," I said. "I'm not," she replied. "I was once from the surface, like you. I volunteered to stay, to help them remember what it meant to be human." I looked at the glowing threads around us. But they're not alive. Not really. Their thoughts are suspended, looping without choice. Lasara's expression dimmed. "That's what troubles me, too." She opened her palm and revealed a seed, small, dry, and fragile. "A man gave this to me before he offered his mind to the archive. He told me, this is my real memory. Not the data, not the words. Just the hope that something still grows." I felt a deep ache in my chest. For years, I'd romanticized the idea of legacy, of saving knowledge, preserving voices from the past. But this was not preservation. This was petrification. "They never asked to live like this," I said. "No," she agreed. "Many were misled. They believed they would be remembered, not retained." I stood, overwhelmed. "Then why not shut it down? Free them?" She looked at me with sadness and clarity. "Because some don't want to be free. Because for others, it's too late. And because this city, this archive, is the only place left that remembers them." The silence that followed was heavier than the sea above. In that moment, I realized the line between memory and prison is thinner than we dare admit. And I began to wonder, how many of my own memories would I surrender if it meant never being forgotten? The moment I stepped out of the archive shell-like sanctuary, everything around me felt colder, heavier. It wasn't the water pressure. It was the weight of what I now knew. Back in my submersible, I stared at the comms panel. With a simple upload, I could transmit the truth to the surface, that the great underwater archive was not a library, but a mausoleum. That minds weren't stored, they were suspended. Not honored, but imprisoned. My finger hovered over the button. But then I heard her voice, Lasara, through the internal speaker. "If you do this, they'll shut it all down. The minds, the echoes, they'll vanish. Are you ready for that kind of silence?" Outside the viewport, the glowing orbs of the memory filaments drifted like jellyfish. So beautiful, so still. I thought of my mother again, of her journals, of the story she wanted to leave behind. If she had chosen the archive, would I have wanted to erase her? It was a terrible question. Behind me, the submersible hummed softly. "Systems ready. Signal locked." But I couldn't move. Then Lasara added, gently, "Some truths don't need to be shouted. They need to be carried, lived with." I sat back in the pilot's chair. My breath fogged the glass. There was no clear right or wrong, only a fragile balance between remembrance and release, between exposing the lie and respecting the lives already intertwined with it. And so, I did neither. I saved the data, kept it hidden, and I turned the submersible around, toward the surface, but not toward the world I'd left, toward a new question. What do we owe the dead, truth or peace? The slow ascent toward the surface was paradoxically the deepest descent of all, into myself. The ocean outside was pitch black now, illuminated only by the gentle pulse of bioluminescent creatures, indifferent to the decisions of men. I watched them swirl past, free in ways I no longer felt. Inside the submersible, the hum of the engine was steady. But inside me, everything shook. Lasara had gone silent after our last exchange, respectfully giving me space. I think she knew I wasn't fighting the archive anymore. I was fighting something far older, my own fear of forgetting, and worse, of being forgotten. When my mother died, I clung to her journals as if they were life rafts. Every page was a voice, a breath, a moment she chose to pass down. The idea that others had surrendered their stories to a machine, that they had chosen silence over imperfection, felt like betrayal. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe they weren't giving up. Maybe they were trusting the future more than I ever could. Could I? I thought of the faces in the archive, their memories preserved like precious fossils. Was I right to question their choice? Or was it merely my own ego that couldn't bear their stillness? For the first time in years, I wished I had someone older to ask. My father, perhaps, or someone who'd walked these existential corridors before me. But those voices are gone now. And so, in their place, I listened to the silence. It didn't give answers, but it didn't lie either. Maybe that's what wisdom is. Learning to sit with silence until the questions reshape you. By the time I neared the surface, I still didn't know what I believed. But I knew what I felt: reverence, unease, and a strange, flickering hope. When the submersible breached the surface, I expected some great revelation, a cathartic moment, like in the stories. But the truth was quieter, heavier. The ocean met me with the same indifference it always had. The sky, overcast. The air, thick with salt and questions. Stillwater Bay looked unchanged. The weather-beaten docks. The old signal tower leaning slightly westward. The gulls circling like they always did. But I had changed. Or maybe I'd simply uncovered something inside me I hadn't wanted to see before. Lasara helped me disembark in silence. She didn't offer platitudes or summaries. Another way she differed from the machines in the archive. She let the silence stretch, respectful of its shape. I walked up the slope to my father's cabin. The same creaking boards, the same rusted wind chimes. But now, every detail struck me differently. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was perspective. A kind of gravity I hadn't noticed before. Inside, the journals I had so stubbornly protected were still stacked neatly on the shelves, waiting. I ran my hand across the worn spines and felt, not pride, not defiance. Something softer. Something that held room for contradiction. Could it be both true and right to preserve memory through machines? And also equally true and right to cling to the old ways, to the imperfect, handwritten record? Maybe the answer wasn't binary. Maybe memory itself was a spectrum, just like the ocean, murky, fluid, occasionally illuminated by flashes of meaning. I lit a candle and sat beside the fireplace, not to burn the journals, not to bury them, but to read one again, as if for the first time. And as I turned the page, I whispered to no one in particular, I'm home. Not because I had all the answers, but because I finally knew the questions were mine to carry. I remember that day more vividly than I should. The air smelled of cedar and salt. My father sat in his usual spot by the window, hunched over his notebook, the pen in his calloused fingers dancing between lines like it knew the way better than he did. You're not writing for them, I had said, pacing. You're writing for ghosts. For yourself. He didn't even look up, just kept scribbling. You think the future will care about ink on paper? I asked. They'll upload your words into a chip and forget they ever came from a human hand. That's when he stopped. Slowly, he looked at me, those deep, weather-worn eyes filled with something I didn't recognize then, something between sadness and love. They won't care, he said. Not at first. But someday, when the power fails or the network collapses, someone will hold this page in their hands and know what it meant to be alive. I rolled my eyes. I was younger then, sharper, hungrier, certain that progress could be measured in terabytes in code. He placed the notebook down carefully, like it was something sacred. It's not the words, he continued. It's the touch, the imperfection, the fact that my hand trembled when I wrote your name. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat felt too tight. He stood, walked over, and placed his hand on my shoulder. You're going to see things I can't imagine, he said. But don't lose your way chasing perfection. Sometimes, the broken things are the ones worth saving. That was the last time we spoke before the stroke took his voice. Years later, beneath the ocean, surrounded by perfection carved into machines, it was his words, imperfect, trembling, that echoed the loudest. The journal wasn't supposed to exist. Atlantis 2.0 ran on a perfect algorithm, every file indexed, every byte of memory scrubbed clean of irrelevance. Personal writings were considered a threat to emotional stability, a variable the system couldn't control. All handwritten materials had been digitized, then burned. But somehow, my father's leather-bound journal had survived, wedged behind a wall panel in his old study. I found it by accident, reaching for a backup cable. My hand brushed leather, rough and warm, as if the notebook itself remembered being touched. For a long while, I didn't open it, just held it in my lap, fingers tracing the faded gold-embossed initials, WMC, William Michael Carter. My father. I hadn't said his name out loud in years. Here, in a city of glass and light where no one ever whispered to the past, it felt almost illegal. Eventually, curiosity cracked me open. The first page was a poem. If I vanish beneath the sea, will you remember the roots I planted in your chest? Will your voice carry mine into tomorrow? His handwriting was as messy as I remembered. Ink smudged, letters uneven, some sentences crossed out 3 times before he settled on the right words. And yet, it was human. Desperately, beautifully human. Each page carried more than words. Doodles, bits of song lyrics, observations about weather patterns, notes about my childhood, a list of questions he never dared to ask me. Reading it felt like time travel, like I was watching the slow erosion of a man who loved deeply and feared more deeply still. It also felt like theft. I wasn't sure if he'd want me to read this, to peel back the layers of the self he kept hidden even from me. But as I reached the final entry, dated just a day before his death, I knew the truth. If you find this, it means the ocean didn't erase me. And if you're reading, then maybe my dreams still live in you. My father never asked to be remembered. He never built monuments, never etched his name into the city's neural archives. He believed in silence, in doing the work and leaving no trail. In Atlantis 2.0, that made him a ghost long before he died. And yet, now, I couldn't stop seeing him everywhere. I saw him in the way the ocean shimmered beneath our platform, how he used to say the sea was alive, a breathing thing that remembers every boat, every storm, every whispered prayer. I saw him in the hesitation of people who dared to dream in a city that taught them not to. And I saw him, most vividly, in myself, in the way I reached for words when silence felt too loud. He had left no voice recording, no official legacy. Only a forbidden notebook, a few whispered memories, and a daughter trying to hold on to something that shouldn't exist. But perhaps that was the point. Perhaps his legacy was never meant to be carved in stone or uploaded to the city's archives. Perhaps his gift was resistance. Not rebellion with fire and noise, but the quieter kind. The kind that lives in poems no one is supposed to write, in thoughts no one dares to say aloud. He taught me that memory is not just what we store, it's what we choose to feel again. And so I wrote. I began to keep a journal of my own, hidden in a new place, waiting for someone else to find. Maybe someday, a daughter like me will hold it in her hands and remember not just her father, but her humanity. Because in a world that forgets, to remember is the boldest act of all. I left the notebook where I found his. Not in the city's official memory archive. Not scanned into the neural cloud or fingerprinted for authentication. Just tucked beneath a loose panel of the subdeck, where the rust met the salt and time forgot to look. It felt right, quiet, hidden, defiant. In it, I didn't write heroic epilogues or clever conclusions. I didn't try to explain Atlantis 2.0 or justify the compromises we all made to survive here. I simply wrote about the feeling of the ocean humming beneath my feet, about the silence that lingered after his voice was gone, about the things we remember not because they're preserved, but because they're loved. I wrote what I couldn't say aloud. In a world so obsessed with noise, maybe silence is the only real act of rebellion. Maybe, years from now, a stranger will stumble on my words and wonder who I was. Maybe they'll sit cross-legged on the subdeck, thumbing through faded pages, and feel something stir in their chest. Not clarity, not certainty, just a quiet echo that says, I was here, and so were you. That would be enough. Because my father's legacy wasn't in the systems he rejected, it was in the choice to remember when forgetting was easier. And mine, I hope, is in the choice to feel when numbness was more convenient. And so, I closed the notebook. I placed it gently beneath the rusted steel, and I let the waves carry the rest. Some say the ocean forgets, that the salt wears down even memory, that the tides erase footprints, dissolve bones, and swallow names. But that's not what I saw. I saw the ocean remember. It remembered my father in the hush of the water filters where he used to sit and hum. It remembered his stories in the rhythm of the turbines echoing through the lower decks. It remembered his stubborn hope, etched into the soft scrawl of his notes, hidden from the eyes of the system. And as I walked the corridors of Atlantis 2.0, alone now, I heard him in everything that moved, not in words, but in resonance. My father wasn't just a man. He was a whisper against forgetting. Maybe that's what we leave behind when the world has no monuments, not statues, not databases, but traces in the places we dared to feel deeply. Traces in silence, in pages, in waves. And I realized something. The ocean doesn't forget. It listens. It holds. Beneath all the metal and mandates, it remembers who we were, when we were still human, still messy, still free enough to ache for something more. In a world where everything is cataloged, sterilized, and stored in neural nets, the ocean keeps what matters off the record. And somehow, that feels like the safest archive of all. I've been asking myself the same question every night since I left Atlantis 2.0. Not out loud, not even in my journal, but somewhere deeper, in the quiet place where truth has no words. What does it mean to remember in a world designed to forget? My father risked everything to preserve stories, to protect one thread of beauty, of chaos, of feeling, in a place where the future had no patience for the past. He hid what mattered not in vaults or drives, but in me. And now I wonder, will I do the same? Will I carry forward what he carried for me? Sometimes, when the world feels too synthetic, too structured, I still hear his voice, faint, but warm, as if the water itself hums with his memory. So I ask you, not rhetorically, not for effect, but truly, if the world erased everything you loved, would you remember for it? Would you carry stories no one else believes in? Would you risk being called foolish, sentimental, or obsolete, just to protect something that doesn't fit the future's blueprint? Because maybe memory isn't data. Maybe it's defiance. Maybe it's love in its oldest form. I don't have the answer, but I hope you'll sit with the question, because that's how remembering begins. Not with certainty, but with care.